Even one down the sideline, and he's got Kazmeir over the top. Big down the sideline. Touchdown. His signature move and his signature performance. Allen, big ball one more time. 58 yards this time.
You're listening to the Bruin Bible. This is your host, Will Decker, bringing you UCLA football content all throughout the year for LA Football Network.
What is up, Bruin Bible listeners? This is your host, Will Decker. We've got a very special sponsor to lead us off. We got BetOnline. BetOnline remains your number one source for all your baseball betting needs this season as it is officially opening day. Get analysis of every play, prop, and point at BetOnline. You'll find the latest odds, bracket contests, team matchups, and game trends at BetOnline as a whole. BetOnline is your baseball, basketball, football headquarters this season. Head to our website today and use our mobile device to sign up and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Be sure to use your promo code, BELIEVE, to receive your bonus pay. BetOnline, where the game starts. Now to the Bruin Bible. What is up, Bruin Bible listeners? Tuesday is here and spring practice number 7 officially in the books. I was not able to go. You can see I'm kind of in my work outfit. I had to go into the office today. Luckily for us, guys, we had a man on the ground, a first-time Bruin Bible guest, Tracy Mcdannald, in the house. Tracy's going to give us a recap of everything that happened this morning from your UCLA Bruins. I couldn't leave you guys hanging on what's going on for one of the more crazy off seasons UCLA has had in a long time. Tracy, first and foremost, how are you doing today, man? And how are you adjusting to covering the Bruins?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. It's my second season now. I started covering them around this time last spring. I jumped in a few practices into the spring. Got kind of used to dealing with Chip Kelly and that sort of thing. And, that transition's been going pretty well. So, yeah, I'm back for another season.
He works for the UCLA Rivals contingent, so make sure you're liking and subscribing everything he's doing when it comes to that. Let's start with the position on offense that everyone's talking about. I've gone through 6 practices. I thought Ethan Garbers, for 5 of those 6 practices, was the best quarterback on the field. Justin Martin kind of flirted with him a little bit from Tuesday and Thursday of last week, but ultimately I felt Dante had the best complete practice on the Saturday open up to the public. What happened today in spring practice when it came to the quarterback room, and who stood out to you watching from the sidelines?
I think from an overall perspective, I think Dante was that guy today.
Hey.
He just keeps making strides. He makes these throws that, you don't expect someone who's only 17 years old to be able to make. He does it with such touch that it's so far out of the reach of the defender that they really can't do much about it, even if they are, covering their man pretty well. And he had a throw like that today to Logan Loya, and I think he had one other one. The one to Loya really stood out because he was on the run, he's off balance, and he's throwing it to the sideline, and it was just, right on the money. And I don't know what else the defender that was I couldn't remember exactly who was defending the play, but there was just nothing you could really do.
Yeah, Dante has been so much fun to watch, man. And 17 years old, just kind of plugging into the system and just him winning back-to-back practices. Because Saturday, like I said, he was my MVP. I thought he was the best quarterback on the field. Hearing he's taking that momentum into week number 3, that's very, very encouraging. Give me kind of your synopsis of Garbers, Schlee, and Martin as well, from what you were able to see from the 7-on-7 and 11-on-11 portions, where it's kind of the only time in practice you can really evaluate, the progress that some of these guys have made.
Yeah, Schlee, he had his best practice to date. He still shows those instances where he struggles with his accuracy, but he cut down. Like, I don't believe he threw an interception today from what I can recall, whereas that was, a really big thing those first 2 weeks. So the decision making has improved, and he probably had the best throw of the day. It was a 45-yarder down the sideline to J. Michael Sturdivant, and it showed off that arm strength where, he's clearly got the best arm of the group, and he finally put it together where he showed off enough of that touch where he basically led him right to the front of the end zone. I think he caught it right about the 5-yard line, and it was really one of those throws where you're like, okay, that's why they brought him in. So he had a really encouraging day. Garber's, I mean, he's been really steady, I think is the best word to use for him. Through these first 7 practices now, he probably had his weakest practice to date, but
Ooh.
it's not necessarily, he didn't necessarily have a bad practice. I think the others just, kind of showed a little bit more of what they're doing. He's still wearing that, that VR camera on his helmet. So obviously that they still want to see what he's seeing. Martin probably of the 4 had the most struggle. This was a day where he really showed some of that youth. There was a particular throw to in the direction of Oladejo that he didn't look him off, and he basically just jumped right in front of it. It was a throw that was supposed to go to Braden Keegan, and he just never really looked him off, either that or he just didn't see him, and he stepped right in front of it. And yeah, he just didn't really show off that arm talent that he's been really displaying the last 6 practices. So, but I mean, it wasn't anything like alarming or anything like that. It just, the others just kind of had better days, and you didn't really see a lot of what Justin had shown through the first 6 practices.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I really appreciate the updates. And just to kind of run through those guys, Schlee, we're at the first spring practice. This is like 2 Tuesdays ago, and they're going through the initial drills. This is before 7-on-7 and 11-on-11. You see the arm talent. I was shocked he had a stronger arm than Martin, given Martin's frame and size and all of that. Stronger arm. You can see he's clearly an athlete. He can run outside the pocket if necessary, kind of get those extended 3rd and 6 first downs if necessary, maybe get a little bit more than that in the right scenario. I was ready to put him above Garbers, given his starting experience. He was a very solid starter at Kent State. And then you just saw them get on the 7-on-7 and 11-on-11. And Garbers was so much more advanced, so much more comfortable with the offense that I couldn't just do it. I just couldn't get to that point. Martin, like you said, to your credit, man, the raw talent is it's breathtaking at times what he can do with the football. There's times where you look at him and you go, if he reaches his ceiling, this guy is a day 1 or day 2 NFL draft pick, with that size, that frame, and how he can fit the ball into different places. Granted, it's going to take a lot of work to get there, but I think from what you can see from the talent level and when his good is good, it's really, really strong. So I like what I've seen from Martin. He's going to have those inconsistent days, but whether it's at UCLA or whether it's another university, this guy's a Division I starter down the line. I think we can all agree on that point. Yeah. And then with Garbers,
go ahead.
With Garbers, Tracy, I think, in my opinion, he's got to be the strongest competitor for the starting job over Dante. It's really encouraging to hear Dante kind of stacking these great days up back one after another. But Garbers, I felt confident when he came in the game last year. Even 2 years ago, the Oregon game, it did end in an interception, but he was moving the football in that scenario where he had Kayvon Thibodeau in his face and he's still making plays, slinging it to the outside. He's got a rocket arm as well. So do you agree with that sentiment that Garbers is probably the lone quarterback right now that's holding Dante Moore back from starting Coastal Carolina September 2nd?
Yeah, that's definitely a fair assessment. Just because he even today, even though he didn't necessarily have the strongest day, you can still see it where he's just the most comfortable, and he should be, in the system, and the way he just reads and reacts. He doesn't really seem to get rattled. It's also a little bit tougher right now to evaluate some of these guys because the offensive line hasn't, one, they don't have their left tackle just yet. And, they're a little bit banged up there.
Been out a little bit, So
and he was out today again. So, yeah, it's a little bit tough because, there are times where these guys are under pressure and you just don't know because they're not live tackling. You don't know exactly how they'd react in those situations entirely. But, just from a standpoint as far as understanding the system, Garbers is definitely still that guy where he's, head and shoulders above everyone. And so that's why it's going to be really interesting to see what this looks like by the end of spring camp. And then by the time fall camp arrives, just how much of a gap those guys have made up on them.
Absolutely. And we kind of have the same opinion. Garbers right now, I think, would still be QB1, moving forward. But I think Dante is going to be climbing up that ladder pretty quickly. It's going to get very competitive in fall camp. Skill position players. You mentioned Sturdivant. He has been so outstanding to watch. I was at the practice on Saturday. He may have had 5 or 6 touchdowns when it came to the red zone in 7-on-7 and 11-on-11 scenarios. Nobody could guard that guy. It sounds like it was very similar today. Sturdivant, give me your take on Sturdivant, the wide receiver room, and which running backs are standing out to you when it comes to these skill position players.
As far as Sturdivant, I mean, the one thing that just keeps popping out is how open he gets and the separation he gets. Because the one I mentioned earlier, that 45-yarder, he was a couple steps ahead of his man again, and you're basically seeing these defensive backs just trying to chase him down, and you just wonder how a guy so big is also so fast. And Chip Kelly mentioned, that combination, and he's not someone who gives away too much from his facial expressions, but as soon as his name was brought up, he kind of cracked a little smile and laughed a little bit, because even he kind of can't believe that he's got someone of that combination in his room right now. And then, having a guy like Kyle Ford out there, equally as big, 6'3" as well. He didn't necessarily do anything that popped out today, but again, you can see the matchup problems those two are going to create anytime they're both on the field at the same time. I think that's something you didn't have with last year's UCLA team. Obviously, you had a big guy like Bobo, but I mean, the next biggest guy was Cam Brown, and it just wasn't. It's not the same as far as a physical standpoint when you look at those two guys, and you just start to wonder, how are opposing cornerbacks gonna match up if both of those guys are on opposite ends of the field?
Yeah, man, and it's just the most loaded wide receiver room UCLA has had maybe ever. I don't even think that's hyperbole to say, just given how deep they can go. Your Loyas, your Cam Browns, Braden Pagan. I mean, he kind of fits the build. Guys, he is huge on the outside, freak athlete, has had a really solid spring camp. But even with this, I think it would take it, God forbid it doesn't happen, an injury to either Ford or Sturdivant for him to really get some time on the outside, unless if they're rotating in different trios or, areas of wide receivers. So it's just such a loaded group. Was TMA actually in practice today? Because he sat out, I think 4 or 5 straight practices to my count.
Yeah, he was out again today. He was banged up at the end of that second practice, so he hasn't practiced since then. Even when I saw him when he initially got banged up, it didn't look like it was anything serious. I don't know if it was a hamstring or a groin. It was just one of those things where he was walking kind of gingerly. I mean, we've seen him off to the side, catching some balls individually, but as far as from a team perspective, yeah, he's still not out there. So he's someone that, they're still waiting to get back. I'm not too worried about his long-term status. I think a lot of it's just precautionary right now. And like you mentioned, that depth of that, wide receiver group, it does allow them to, get guys other reps. And you brought up Braden Pegan, and I'll throw in another name, Ryan Cragen. Yeah. I asked Chip Kelly about both of those guys today, and he really likes the depth and the athleticism that they both provide. Like you were saying, if somebody goes down, there are some names that maybe UCLA supporters aren't as familiar with right now, but they should probably start getting familiar with.
Is up, Bruin Bible listeners. We have another advertisement for you. We are so lucky to be sponsored by the great people at Athletic Greens. I started taking Athletic Greens specifically because I was lacking energy, lacking focus throughout the day, and needed some special pick-me-up ingredients to make things happen in my life. Athletic Greens has done just that. I've become absolutely addicted to the process. It has over 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source ingredients, probiotics, adaptogens to make your life easier by doing this during the day. I like to take it to start my mornings off. I like to do it before a workout. Makes you feel energized, focused, and just have a lot more energy throughout the day than I typically expected. Right now it's the time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just 1 scoop in a cup of water every single day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/LAFB. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/LAFB to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Athletic Greens, a game changer when it comes to your health and your focus and your mindset. Yeah, no, Craig in the Penn transfer. I mean, from that one-handed catch he made on that Dante Moore route, he has kind of been just the unsung hero. Even like Josiah Norwood never gets the credit he deserves. Every time the ball is sprayed in his direction, he seems to make like a nice play on the football. So just deep in a lot of ways. TMA, to his credit, those first two practices, he looked like maybe the third best receiver on the team, behind Ford and Sturdivant. But he just has not been able to get back on the field. It doesn't look too serious, which is great. I think there's just a precautionary thing to kind of keep him out of spring ball. But, boy, they're going to be firing in numbers from the wide receiver room. Running back room, I have a take that I think you may be interested in when it comes to who I believe RB1 can be. From the practices I watched, I thought Carson Steele was probably going to be RB1 coming in. TJ Harden, I think, had a higher ceiling, but he was RB2. This is just coming into spring practices as a whole. But from what I have seen and the burst that Harden has, and that one area that I think separates him from Carson Steele is he's an underrated pass catcher from what I've seen. He can move with the football. He can get out in the open field and make plays. I actually have TJ Harden 1A to Carson Beals 1B now. It's kind of flip-flopped. Tell me about what you saw today, and do you think TJ Harden is RB1 for UCLA moving forward?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, a 1A, 1B type situation. I think they both bring something a little bit different. I think the big thing I noticed with Harden is his ability to cut it to the outside. He showed that again today, ripped off a big run to the outside, whereas Steele, he a lot of his most impressive runs, at least the ones I've seen, are more up the middle. And again, I think that you're going to, if the offensive line gets right, you're going to see that a little bit more in these practices. It's a little bit tougher to see right now, but you can definitely see with Carson, I don't know how opposing defenses take this guy down with just one guy. Yeah. So, when you lose a guy like Zach Charbonnet, to have a guy like Carson Steele, I think they're not losing a lot there as far as, yards after contact. But yeah, like you mentioned about TJ Harden, he does have that extra layer to him. Carson's had a couple issues with some fumbles and some drop catches here and there. So I'd say the hands are probably a little bit more toward TJ Harden, but really there's no wrong option if you're Chip Kelly as far as, who you're throwing out there to start, because they're both going to get an equal, fair share of reps come game time.
Absolutely, man. And I think that's kind of the path I have. I think Colson Yankoff might be RB3 too, from what I've seen. Really have liked the work he's done there. We all talk about the quarterback competition. We talk about the running back competition. The one competition that I don't think is getting enough press, but it's a loaded room, is the tight end room. Matavao transfers in. Habermill comes back. Carson Ryan still kind of working his way back into spring ball shape. He hasn't really been on the field. Jack Peterson's made some big-time plays. Anyone stand out from the tight end room today, and who do you have as tight end one through 7 practices of spring football?
I don't know if anyone's really separated themselves, but I mean, the transfer from Oregon, Moliki, he's definitely someone I think is going to push Hudson there for that starting tight end job. I think right now it's also just a matter of, developing that chemistry, the playbook and everything like that. But I don't know if I think it might be a situation where it was similar to last year where, Ezeki and Habermill kind of, you saw them shine at different moments of the season. So that wouldn't surprise me again to see a similar situation like that. I don't know if either one of them to this point looks, significantly well ahead of the other. So I think with those two, it's going to take a little bit more time. So someone who actually impressed today at that position, Michael Churich, had a couple nice catches today from a couple of different quarterbacks. So he's another one where, again, I think you could see some situations where if they were to run, multiple tight end sets, they could surprise you in some ways. Because again, they're so loaded at receiver that they can kind of, sneak up on teams a little bit if they change it up a little bit.
Absolutely, man. Matavao, I would assume, is probably tight end number one. He's just been the most consistent. You know, he'll make 1 or 2 catches a practice. It's not necessarily like the Sturdivant where he's making so many catches it's impossible to ignore. But if you're watching it like you and I were, you see the 1 or 2 catches where he'll just get the first down. It's like, okay, this guy is kind of as advertised coming from Oregon. Enough with the offense. Defense. Who stood out to you today on the defensive side of the football? I heard you mentioned Oladejo earlier. He's been a guy that, man, I really underestimated how big this guy was. And the plays that he's made where he's 6'4", 250, he's coming in off the edge. I even saw him putting players in the right positions last week for a guy that just got to campus, you know, like a month ago. I mean, it's unbelievable what Oladejo has been. Was he a guy that stood out this practice? And who are some other guys that you saw on the defensive side of the football really stand out in practice number 7?
Yeah, like I said, he had that interception early, and he just has such a, like you were mentioning, you know, he's already a vocal presence out there. He's very much, someone you're going to look at and say, you know, he's going to be one of the leaders of this group. Once you actually pair him and Darius, up together inside, it's going to be very interesting. Darius didn't do as much today as he's shown in some of the other practices where he's been flying around. But again, the possibilities with those two are really interesting. As far as strictly today goes, Hayden Nelson actually made a lot of nice stops. He came in for a couple sacks, had a couple tackles in the backfield. So he's someone I wasn't, really looking at too much. I just, every time the whistle blew, you saw his number there in the backfield. So that was an interesting, development to see. Part of that was also Shea Bryant-Strother was not practicing today. He was another one of those on the injured list today. So I think, part of that was him just taking advantages of his extra opportunities getting on the field. So yeah, that was a really nice bright spot to see for that linebacker group.
Yeah, man. And last question I'll pose you with, Tracy. You've been awesome coming on here. You're keeping the Bruin Bible fan base engaged with what's going on at spring practice. If you had to pick 3 game balls to give out to each practice participant today, or any 3 players that stood out the most to you personally, who would those be and why?
Dante, for the reasons I stated, just because, he is already showing so much at such a young age that it's going to be really hard to keep him off the field. The combination again of, being able to put some velocity on his throws, but also put some touch on it, really, makes him stand out. Sturdivant, again, not a surprise there. He's just he's probably been the best player on the field consistently. As far as, doing his job and on top of, those highlight reel type of plays. And then I'd probably say Hayden Nelson today. I mean, like I said, he really jumped out at me today. Just as far as, they've shown it a little bit the last couple of practices now, with, getting some early stops in the backfield, some minimal gains here and there. And again, I also still wonder how much of that is because they're going up against an offensive line that isn't at full strength. But at the same time, you're glad to see that if you're a UCLA fan, because if you're not taking advantage of a team at full strength, then you have to, worry a little bit more about your defense. Whereas here, they are taking advantage of some of those weaknesses that we're seeing right now. So, I think those 3 are the ones that really shine today when I think back to some of the bigger plays at practice.
Folks, we wanted Dante Moore to succeed, and we're getting it in spades right now. And Hayden Nelson, the best thing to come to UCLA from Wisconsin since our guy John Gaines. Tracy, thank you so much for coming on the show, my man. Really pleased to have you on. Where can we follow you? Where can we get your articles, social? Plug yourself, my man.
So everything we're doing over is at bruinblitz.com. You can get your detailed practice reports every day. We'll be out there. And then also, if you need some recruiting coverage, there's that as well as, from the Rivals team that supports that side of it. So, yeah, plenty of to read up on right now, especially with the thick of spring ball, and we'll definitely have more stuff coming, as well as beyond the spring when we start laying out our thoughts of everything we've seen.
Absolutely. Well, Tracy, thank you so much for coming on, guys. Bruin Bible, make sure you guys are liking and subscribing the LAFB YouTube channel and what we got going on there. Bruin Bible, we are officially out. You guys have a great